Hello, I'm Marcus, and you're about to watch some horror filmmakers, writers, and actors share some of their real-life spooky tales with you. What you might not know is, these people are some of the amazing guests that we're going to have on our brand new show, The Grimm Exchange. The show will bring you all the latest horror entertainment news. So if you want to hang out with a filmmaker, find out what they're up to, get the latest news from the world of horror, and have a bit of fun along the way, tune in to our first episode of the Grimm Exchange on Friday the 13th of November. Without further ado, let's hear some spooky tales.
Hi, so my spooky story actually comes from my buddy Ben Webster, who's in my first movie, Deadheads. He played McDinkle. And Ben used to work at a funeral parlor, a funeral home. And he was working there one night, late night, I think with another buddy. And, they set up the rooms so that, people it's a viewing. People can come see their relatives or friends that have passed on, over the course of the day. And it was late at night, and they were getting ready to close up for the night. And they essentially were, I think, at the front desk, and they heard this, ding of the door. It was either a bell or a chime that goes off when somebody walks in through the door. And they weren't at the door, they didn't see who came in, but they knew it was pretty late. So Ben made his rounds and went to the viewing rooms to make sure nobody was there and to let them know that they were closing up. And he went to one of the viewing rooms and he looked over at the coffin, and the casket was open, and there was a picture on top of it, and there was a woman standing over the casket looking down on the body. And he just, looked at her for a moment and then said, "Hey, ma'am, excuse me, we're closing up for the night. If you could, pay your last respects, we need to lock the doors and kind of close things down." So the woman at the casket looked over at him, and in that moment, he realized that the woman looking at him was also the same woman in the picture for who was in the casket. So, he immediately left this situation. I think they double checked to make sure nobody was in the place after this again. And he locked up and got the hell out of there, is my understanding. So that's my favorite creepy story. And it comes from a buddy of mine who, I don't think he's a believer in that type of stuff. So it always gets me when I think about it.
Hi, I'm Charlie Steeds. This is something kind of ghostly that happened to me maybe about 6 or 7 years ago. I was still living with my mum and my little brother, and we were moving house. We actually used to live in a converted church, which has a whole story in itself, which was kind of scary, because you'd go on holiday and you'd come back from holiday and furniture, I remember a whole huge leather sofa had moved. When we got home, it had moved 2 meters out from the wall, and there were scratch marks, with red stains on them in the actual rock, in the stonework of the church. So that was a really creepy house. But anyway, we moved out of one creepy house and moved in with my mum's friend into what turned out to be a way more creepy house. Anyway, when we got to this house right in the middle of the countryside, right in the middle of nowhere, and we were staying there through winter as well, so it was always dark and cold and sort of horrible and creepy at this house. My mum's friend, she immediately, when we got there, would say, "We don't go in this room at the end of the hall." There was a long hallway upstairs with a room at the end. She'd say, "No, we don't go in that room, because, I get a scary feeling in that room, so I will never, let's just not go in there." So my room was right next to this room. So already you're kind of on edge, because you've got this, creepy room at the far part of the house, and weird things would happen in this house. I remember all of us, me, my mum and my mum's friend, we all woke up in the middle of the night. We all came out onto the landing, because there was this weird kind of I can't even describe it. It was just a weird noise had just woken us all. It was some sort of humming noise that had sort of awoken all of us in the middle of the night, and it was just disorientating generally, this house. Anyway, I would be sort of going around this house doing my business, and as you often do, I kept seeing something out of the corner of my eye. Something, it was small and white, like a dog or something, and it kept sort of, especially when I was in the kitchen, it kept sort of darting past the corner of my eye, making me turn. But when you're a little bit on edge in a place like this, you do get that sort of weird feeling, and it, you know, you just dismiss it as that's just me thinking I saw something, but I didn't. But anyway, 2 or 3 or 4 more times I'm in the kitchen, or I'm in this sort of area of the house, and I keep thinking I see this thing go rushing along the floor and out the door, and I'm sort of looking, and one day I went out following where I thought the thing had gone. I went through the door, I was looking around, and I thought to myself, well, this is like 3 times now that I've actually followed this, whatever this thing in the corner of my eye is. I've actually followed it, looking for, you know, what the hell is it? So I thought, well, if I'm actually getting up and looking around, then I must be seeing something other than just a blur in the corner of my eye. So when my mum got back from work that night, I said to her over dinner, I keep seeing something out of the corner of my eye, like darting along. And before I could even finish, my mum was like, when you're in the kitchen, you see like a little white thing come scuttling by. And I'm like, yes. And she was like, I keep seeing it too. I keep sort of following it and looking and seeing, you know, where the hell has it gone? Anyway, so we both were seeing this little thing, which must have, like, if it was a ghost, it must have been like a little animal or a pet or something. So anyway, we said, when my mum's friend gets back from work, let's ask her, you know, if she ever sees something like that. And anyway, when she got home and sat down for her dinner, we said, just want to ask you, we keep seeing something out of the corner of our eye in the kitchen. And she said, oh yeah, you've seen the cat. Yeah, the cat's always around here. And she said, the house was an abattoir, where, you know, animals died, and there would have been stuff like, you know, cats and stuff. So she was just like, yeah, that little ghost cat is always running around.
When I was a student back in the 80s, living in Manchester, I lived in a small terraced house in sort of South Manchester. Several times walking down the stairs, I'd get this movement out the corner of my eye, as if something had flickered, something had moved. And whenever I looked, there was never anything to see. And so I thought nothing of it. And then one time, probably about 6 months when we'd been living in the house, as I came down, I saw this flicker, but I also saw an old lady come out of one of the bedrooms and walk along the landing. The moment that I looked to where she wasn't there. I never at any point felt threatened. My assumption was she'd somebody who's lived in the house in the past. And it just felt like I was watching an echo of something had gone by. A number of times afterwards, again, I saw the little flicker, but I never saw the movement. I never saw the lady again. And a few times I stayed there just staring at the space, but I could never see it when I looked directly at it. So maybe ghosts are a side-eye thing. Maybe sometimes when you see that flicker out the corner of your eye, you never know. That may just be a ghost.
When I was between the ages of 10 and 13, I was very into all things occult, especially tarot readings and my Ouija board. So I forced anyone who came into the walls of my home to have their tarot cards read and also to play the Ouija board with me. Always forever looking for a sign. One day, I think it was my friend Ashley, and we were doing the Ouija together. Lots of energy, making big figure eights and circles and things, and then it just stopped. We'd been asking for a sign, and we waited and we listened, and nothing happened. We decided maybe we'd pack it up for the day, and then the phone rang. So very skeptical. I thought, oh, it's probably my mother or something. Go over, answer the phone. Nothing. Click.
So on a trip to Edinburgh, I went on a tour into the underground vaults. There was quite a few of us there, a lot of skeptical people, myself included. And we were shown one room which was now home to a modern day witch's coven. And we saw it from the outside first, and it was painted red. There were candles burning, and it looked really obvious and really tacky, and we all found it quite funny. Then we were taken in, and the whole group just came to a hush. And on the floor was painted a pentagram where we were told there was a demon trapped. And the tour guide said, "You are willing to step inside if you want, but that's nothing to do with me. I'm going to step outside the room now. Those that want to step inside can. Those that want to follow me, just come out." And not a single person would go into that pentagram. And that includes me. I left the room straight away.
So I was once on an airplane flying from Frankfurt, Germany to Manchester in the UK. And next to me, there sat a gentleman. There was a seat free between us, but we were pretty much next to each other. And I had some snacks with me. And, you know, trying to be as considerate as possible, I asked him if it was okay if I started snacking, just in case the sound or the smell bothered him. And he said it's fine. And we got to talking and started exchanging, some details about what we do for a living. And I said, I work in horror. And the beauty about talking to people about horror is that a lot of people always have a story that they like to tell, something creepy and weird. And this was that gentleman's story. So he claimed that he was never really one to believe in anything supernatural, as most of the people who experience these stories do. But there was one incident in his life that kind of made him challenge his thoughts as to what was possible. He said that his grandparents were friends with another couple around their age. His grandfather had passed away when he himself was a young boy, and his grandmother was still alive. And this other couple that they were friends with, there came a point, very sadly, when they were of an older age, that one person within this couple passed away. And because the two families were very close, they all gathered at the funeral together. It was very sad. And his grandmother, having just lost a family friend, was absolutely distraught and drank alcohol more than she usually did until she was in a state that one could consider drunk, if you will. And he told me that at this point he was in his early 20s, I believe. And they started having this conversation that was just so blunt and honest and sincere, and more so than they usually tend to do. Now, his grandfather's death was not something that was spoken about much in his family because it was very difficult on everyone, especially his grandmother. But because of the nature of the conversation they were having at the time, he felt like this was the right time to talk to her about it. So he said, grandmother, grandma, whatever he called her, Nana, what happened to grandfather? No one ever speaks about his passing. How did he pass? I'm paraphrasing here. He might not have used the word passing, and both were very drunk during this conversation. And his grandmother said, well, it's a really tragic story. He was standing in his kitchen making a sandwich, and suddenly he fell over. His head hit the counter, the edge of the counter, and he fell to the ground and died. And this guy said, wow, that is just so sudden and awful. I understand why it was so tough on you. And she quickly ended the conversation and changed the subject. So eventually, 9 months later, his grandmother also ended up passing away. And it was really bizarre because she died the exact same way his grandfather had, with the sandwich, the counter. So he went to his parents and he said, how weird is it that grandmother died the exact same way as grandfather? And his parents are like, what are you talking about? And he said, making a sandwich in the kitchen, falling over, your head hitting the counter and then hitting the ground dead. It's so specific. It's really weird that it was the exact same. And his parents said, well, you were too young to remember this when your grandfather passed, but he actually died in the hospital. He was sick for a very long time. And it was then that he realized that his grandmother had foreshadowed her own death 9 months prior.
All right, so we'll be performing a voice distortion and facial blur to keep your identity secret.
We probably shouldn't do the face blur.
Okay.
I feel like facials and blurs are kind of synonymous with Japanese pornography. It might be better if we do a silhouette.
Sure, yeah, we can arrange that.
The year was 1997. I had recently tore the ACL in my right leg, preventing me from trying out for my freshman football team. So I decided to become the water boy instead. I was sort of public enemy numeral uno because I had a crush on the quarterback Brad's girlfriend, Fannie Marie Schnarfins. So one night, I'm hanging out with my boy Chucky, and we were approached by Brad and his friends, who suggested we do this initiation to be a part of their group. Now, being 13, we just wanted to fit in, so of course we said yes. And then he leads us to this abandoned water plant, and we walked around for a while, and then we came across this narrow pipe, and it was suspended 20 or so feet in the air. I was told that I needed to cross that in order to sign my name on a wall of graffiti. Now, Chucky, he looked me dead in the corneas, and he said, why don't we make like Tom and Cruise? And I'll never forget that line, because I fucking love Tom Cruise. But what I didn't love was the Chuckster telling me my business. So, I ignored him and attempted to cross the pipe. Well, long story short, in the middle of me crossing that pipe, shoot, snapped, and I just fall 20 feet into this weird compound, and I black out. Now, when I woke up, I was in this, I don't know, it was a strange forest. And I screamed and I ran, and then it hit me. My ACL was no longer torn. I mean, I was running like Forrest Gump, minus the ice cream with a higher IQ. Now, as I'm booking it like the T-1000 through this dense forest, I bump into this dwarf-like man, and he was traveling with this beautiful girl who looked identical to Fannie Marie Schnarfins. And then we get to talking, and she tells me about her religion, Tao. I pretend to be interested, because I'm 13 and my hormones are skyrocketing out my Janko genes. She eventually takes me to the leader of this religion, Master Chung, who turned out to be one of 5 mystic warriors. Now, you might have a hard time believing this, but the warriors were anthropomorphic kangaroos, and each one represented an element. Lao, warrior of wood. Chi, warrior of fire. Sun.
Okay, hold on. Dude, I know this story.
You must have read my article in BuzzFeed.
No, this is a movie. I've seen it. Somebody turn the lights on. I knew it.
No!
I knew it, dude.
This is a stress ball.
Then squeeze it.
Eh?
It's clearly not a stress ball.